to a court tour.
I'm always happy to do that, Councilmember Waring. So let's have your attention for a few seconds. We gather this afternoon to look for the betterment of our citizens, for the betterment of our community, for the betterment of our state and country. We ask God's blessing upon us to guide us and lead us to fulfill all obligations to ourselves and to our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got the minutes for approval for the October 12th and 26th meetings. 26 meetings. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Properly moved. Do we have a second on those minutes?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Temporary encroachments, Mr. O'Brien, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We want to take a few minutes here. Matt Alltop, our Superintendent for Environmental Services, is going to give you guys and ladies a brief presentation.
Susan's here. Susan, I don't know if you heard what's going on, but
Why don't we do this, Mr. McQueenie? Why don't we take a motion to go in executive session?
I'll make that motion that we go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I see your hand up. You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute.
No problem.
Could I just suggest as an alternative? I mean, this is the first time we've done this. I think we're going to find it's a very useful tool, management tool and all like that. Maybe we weren't thinking about some of the privacy issues. Could I suggest we just defer this presentation to a future meeting and let Matt and Tom and legal just think a little more about what gets included and what doesn't, because it's really, if they take care of those privacy issues, it's certainly something I'd love for the public to be aware of.
I agree. 100%.
Absolutely. I'm fine with that. I'll make a motion that we defer that presentation to a subsequent meeting after legal and public services have gotten together to make sure that we represent our employees to the best of our ability.
We'll make sure we do that, sir.
That'd be great.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second, we defer it. Yes.
Second it. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Thank you, Mr. Alltop. Let me tell you, I can see that's some exciting stuff. I see why you wanted to present it, man. That's some real time.
Very excited. We'll put it in a form where we won't hurt anybody and make sure we do that for y'all the next time.
More than anything, Mr. Chairman, I just don't want anybody to get the wrong perception. Anybody can look at our Zoom call and not understand what we're talking about and say, well, this person's got 98% done and this person's got this, or this person reached this speed and this person didn't. And I just don't want there to be a perception that
I think you're right. Well taken.
we're not evaluating our employees in any way in this thing.
I thought well taken. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Defer.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alltop and Mr. O'Brien on that one. Like I said, that was some good stuff. I look forward to you coming back.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor?
I think Mr. O'Brien jumped right to that. Did we hear from the encroachments?
No, I don't think so. So, Mr. O'Brien, anything on temporary encroachments that stood out?
We did not have any for this meeting, sir. We did not have any for this meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So now we're down to H, low battery phase 2. Approval of memorandum agreement with CP.
I'll move for approval of that item.
Properly moved.
Second.
Second out there, and I see Mr. Fountain coming on. Mr. Fountain, any information to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, this is just the basically legal MOA approving the method for reimbursement on CWS's in-contract work on phase 2.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Stormwater update, Mr. Fountain. Updates, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have a number of updates, I guess is starting to be usual this month, which is good. A lot of construction work going on in the area. So I'm going to try to juggle bouncing between about 4 different screens as we do this, and hopefully that'll add some interest to the updates.
Okay.
So let's see. I'm going to start us with the Spring Fishburne project. So let me pull up my project update, which is going to show a different project because that's the end of the presentation. Okay, so here's a little bit of update in project work. Actually, before I jump into Spring Fishburne, I just wanted to give you a quick update on where we are with some of the kind of the less glamorous projects, the more of the rehabilitation side. So our infrastructure rehabilitation work, we've been working through we talked about this a number of times at committee, but I think it's always worth kind of giving an update on where we stand with it. Our roadside open ditch system rehabilitation, and this is where we're going back and actually going neighborhood by neighborhood and basically digging out the ditches back to their original design grade, blowing out all the driveway culverts, fixing any buried pipe sections where people have piped in their front yards under encroachment permits, right-of-way permits. Basically kind of restoring a neighborhood's drainage to the best that it can be based on the original design. So these aren't the enhancement projects yet. These are just the restoration projects. We do all this work for the open ditch systems with our in-house forces. We have about 114 road miles. Typically, there's a system on either side of the road, so it ends up being 228 actual ditch miles, but about 114 road miles. To date, we've gotten through 40 road miles. That's a little bit less than 2 years. We've actually accelerated our pace a little to where we are working at about 20 road miles per year over the last calendar year. Working through that 114 mile system, we'd be estimating completion by the end of 2025. And that's going to vary a little bit. Some neighborhoods are much easier than other neighborhoods, depending on the level of tree debris, how much sediment has accumulated, how much open ditch versus pipe system there is. But that program's shown real progress. We're making, I think, significant improvements. We've put together a better notification system where we give residents information about it. It's not perfect in that we're still working in what people kind of feel like is their front yard sometimes, even though it is within the public right of way. But I think the combination of notification and seeing the whole neighborhood being reworked has led to far more positive comments than negative comments. So it's a good place that we're getting to. The closed systems is sort of our.
Mr. Chairman. Keith.
Yes, sir, Mr. Councilman Shea.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment about what Matt's last comment was. And so we've been going around apparently through the neighborhoods, and it's created a little bit of a stir, quite frankly, Matt. And I may be calling on you for some remedial work we need to be doing on with some of these neighborhoods. But I'm glad that we're doing this work. I mean, it really is important work, which we've been doing. But I think we need to have maybe some constituent outreach, a little bit more detail. So I'll get back with you after the meeting and talk to you about it a little more detail on that. But thanks.
Sure, no, I'm happy to. And we do. Generally, each neighborhood generally has on the order of 1 or 2 residents out of any 50 to 100 residents who are kind of unhappy because their particular property doesn't flood and they see the damage to the front ditch system until the grass revegetates. And there is some frustration. I think we've been trying to tell people it's a really good place when you feel like your city is doing too much drainage maintenance rather than not enough drainage maintenance, which is our typical complaint.
Yes. Yes.
So, but you're right. I mean, it's a challenge, and it does look, when you freshly trench ditches, it does look rough for the first 6 months or so until the grass revegetates through the next growing season. So it's something that I think we're a little less invasive maybe than DOT tends to be, but it's still a pretty significant change when you leave for work in the morning and come home in the evening and see the difference. But we're certainly happy to reach out and talk to any residents about it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Fountain.
Yes.
Particularly when you go in some of these front yards where people had the pipes installed, in the ditch so the lawn could grow over.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when those, because I know in New Orleans that's happened, but some of those pipes were never put in at the right elevation. In some cases, it inhibits the flow of the water. What happens when you run into that?
Yeah, so systems that have completely failed where we've seen pipe separations or collapse that's blocking the water, we'll remove those sections of the system and restore it to open ditch. We haven't seen as much of that, or if they're when there are properties like that, typically those are the properties that are flooding badly because the underground system's actually causing the water to basically come up out of the ditch and into their yards. So we haven't had as much complaint with those as we have with sort of the higher points of the neighborhood where people generally don't have a lot of water, or the property upstream of them has enough damage that it's blocking the water from their property. Those are sort of the major complaints we have, or the few people in each neighborhood who don't have any drainage issues, but still have to have their ditch reworked to make the overall neighborhood work.
Okay, good. All right.
So Yeah, the counterpoint to the open ditch are the closed systems. So these are somewhat ironically both the newest neighborhoods and the oldest neighborhoods in the city generally, with the peninsula and then many of the newer subdivisions. This is the pipe systems. In the peninsula, typically you have one pipe that runs down the center of the street. In most of the newer subdivisions, you have a pipe on each side of the street. So it's a little harder to judge road miles versus pipe miles because of the different types of streets. But we have a little over 400 road miles of pipe system. We're estimating from a series of different project work that we've done with drainage assessments that we have about 100 miles that need heavy inspection. And within those, we think a portion of those, somewhere around 30 or 40 miles, probably need significant cleaning. We did work with the budget ad hoc committee last year to kind of reallocate some positions within the department to create that inspection and asset manager inspection position. That position is getting started now, going through and trying to allocate priorities for pipe cleaning. And we do estimate getting through our targeted pipe cleaning work by 2028. So that's not the entire system this time. It's really targeting it at the major blockage areas within the peninsula and within the newer subdivisions again. That really is just getting started in large part this year. We have done some selective cleaning over the last couple of years, especially on the east side, but this will be kind of our first year with a major investment into that type of cleaning. The other kind of the third tripod, I guess, of our ditch and pipe conveyance system are the rear and side yard systems. So these are the ones that are hand cleaned generally. They're the ditches that run along the side of the home or behind the homes in much of West Ashley or James Island especially. These are, again, in-house forces, typically working with weed eaters, with pole saws, pitchforks, trying to hand clean these systems. We did complete the hand clean level of rehabilitation over the 2019 to 2020 years for every one of these systems that we maintain in the city. Some of the systems still don't work as well as we would like to because there's only so much you can realistically do with a shovel and pitchfork, with any kind of realistic productivity. So we did work to obtain a walking excavator, which is sort of a smaller, more flexible piece of equipment that can get into some of these ditches. That'll come in hopefully in April to May this year, and be able to clean out some of the areas where we're still having some challenges. But it's again much better than it used to be. We've rehabilitated all these. We're currently cutting all of them once per year, doing a heavy vegetative cutback once per year. We're looking to get to, with the walking excavator over the next couple of years, get to being able to get every ditch maintained twice per year would be our goal. So 2 heavy vegetative cutbacks through the growing seasons, basically. So now switching over to the Spring Fishburne project. So at this point, we've completed the excavation and the outfall. That's sort of this long, skinny section you see on the left picture, where the eventual box culverts will lay to bring the water out into the river. We've completed all our excavation, installed the foundation, and then you can see kind of the small brown squares at the bottom of those rock are actually H-piles, which are basically look like giant I-beams being driven into the ground to support the eventual box culverts. Those are about 50% complete. On the right, you see the wet well. That's the very large hole in the ground, basically, where the pumps will eventually sit to pump out the water from the project. And you need a large container like that for cycle times on your pumps. Your pumps don't burn out from cycling on and off during different size storm events. We've completed most of the excavation in the wet well, though there is still some excavation continuing. We're starting to lay in the rock foundation as sections of the wet well are completed. And then you see those pieces of circular rebar sticking up in the wet well. Those are basically the existing pipe piles that have been excavated, concreted, and now rebar tied to eventually tie into the slab that we're preparing now for the pour of basically a base foundation for that wet well. So again, significant construction progress there. This is one of these chances where I wanted to jump in. If you're ever talking about that project or would like to share information about that project, we do have a excellent new website for the Spring Fishburne project. It's relatively new, so hopefully you're seeing the Spring Fishburne website
Hey, Matt,
at this point. Yep.
can you go back to that last shot, please?
Which one?
The one that had all the
Well,
rebar.
Yeah. let's see, 1 second. You're just trying to test my my Zoom capabilities now.
Yeah. I am stretching you a little bit here. So just if you don't mind, can you
Yeah.
just go back to this a little bit slower? The parallel construction looks like going on. Is one just the
Oh, sure. Yeah.
area?
So this is what we call the outfall section. If you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but
Right, I can.
Yeah, moving through. This is where we're digging out to put the eventual box culvert. So there's 3 like 10-foot by 12-foot wide box culverts that will come in here and act as pipes to convey the water out into the river. This platform next to it is actually a temporary trestle built in the marsh for the cranes to operate on to do the work. It's about 1 million pounds of steel sitting in the river to be able to do the work to install the outfall here. The
Right.
picture to the right is actually a close-up of what is back here between the 2 bridges where all the cranes are sitting.
Right.
That's the wet well, which is where the deep tunnel comes up to the surface. Then there's basically a very, very large hole excavated there for that water to come up into. Eventually that will all be concreted and encased, and the pumps will sit inside that well. And basically you let water flow in there, you turn the pumps on, the pumps pull down the water level towards near the bottom of the concrete structure. The pumps turn off, they have a chance to cool down while the water fills back up, the pumps turn back on again. And one of the things of pump design is you can't have pumps turn on and off quickly. It's called cycle time. They'll burn out, they'll basically fry themselves from not having cooling during the consistent run. So for a big storm event, it doesn't matter that much. Your pumps can turn on and just keep running. They cool themselves very well if they're running. But during a very small storm event, you need, where the water isn't coming into the well fast enough for the pump to be running all the time, you need a very large container basically to let the pump down that water with a long enough amount of time that it doesn't burn itself up.
So Matt, is that all automatic, or is there somebody who's really watching this and pulling?
No, it's all
pushing-
automatic. It's all on a SCADA system where it's basically computer controlled off of different level sensors. There always are manual backups in case something goes wrong, but it's all computer controlled.
So is this stuff going to be connected to a command room somewhere to be observing this and watching and making sure this stuff is operating properly?
Yes, yeah. So that's phase 5 of the project that we've talked about. We've got the contract in place right now to update the design of phase 5. Phase 5 is the pumps themselves, the primary pumps. The dewatering pumps actually go in phase 4, but the main primary pumps, the pump station that will sit above ground between the 2 bridges, which will look like a mid-sized building.
Right.
A control room, diesel generators to run the pumps, kind of a whole system to operate that eventual outfall.
So this is going to work pretty well before phase 5 is completed.
So it will work extremely well at low tide events before phase 5 is completed. At high tide events, there's still an improvement, but it's not what it will be with the pumps.
I got to tell you, this is just really fascinating to see how all this is going to work, and the amount of construction and design this is really entailing. And that's why I was just trying to get some more of the minute details of that, Matt. I just think this is going to have such a huge impact on the peninsula once we complete even just this particular phase of the work. And then it looks like something out of the future to some degree when we get to full completion with the full project completed with full phase 5. So thanks for spending some time on that with us and explain that a little bit more in more detail. That's really quite interesting work we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to show you briefly the website because I agree. It's confusing. It's hard to understand what's going on between the river. We actually get a lot of questions if we're building the West Ashley bike ped bridge because of the causeway that extends out for the cranes to operate on. But so this is our kind of updated Spring Fishburne website. We've been trying to go through and start updating our all of our project website work. So it includes kind of walking you through all the different phases. You can see this kind of slightly subdued highlighting is the area of the peninsula that is actually improved for drainage by the project. So it's a huge chunk of the flooding areas in the peninsula. Then it kind of works through the phases. So phase 1 in bright orange is where phase 1 occurred, and what phase 1 was is on the left side of the screen. Then you get phase 2, phase 3. It shows on the bottom here what it looks like in profile and how everything starts to come together. It has the years of when it was built. Phase 4, which of course we're building now, which is the wet well coming in and being constructed in the outfall. And then phase 5, which is what we were just discussing, is when you'll see eventually the pump station superstructure and the pumps go in. And we have that kind of work through the information there. It kind of has some quick facts about how the project works. And as you were asking, Councilman Shade, like how much improvement is there at low tide versus high tide in the different phases. Some kind of nice background pictures of what the deep tunnels look like and how they work. Some of the costs, how much money was going into local businesses and things during the construction. And then at the bottom, which is kind of the fun part for the engineers, at least, is all the pictures of all the cool stuff that was built during the project. We have some project videos, showing different components, drone shots. There's kind of a whole extensive gallery you can get into and really sort of see the history of the project, because it's all below, almost all of it is below ground, other than the traffic disruptions from the first couple of phases on US 17 and some of the beautification elements. So it's easy to not necessarily know what's been happening for the last 5 or 6 years, realistically, of heavy construction work. So it's something we're trying to get more information out there and help share that project knowledge.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Matt.
So let me jump quickly back to slideshow. So the next project. So low battery, phase 1. This project, phase 1, is now substantially complete. We've hit that contract milestone with the contractor. These are pictures from over the weekend or late last week. Basically, this is a little bit earlier than that. This is the final paving of the speed table going in, which is sort of the traffic control feature for bike ped safety in the middle of the intersection here. You can see the new wall, the new veil wall, the riprap, all the new asphalt, new landscaping, and then the top corner is kind of a detail of the curve of the wall here, which is one of the more complex elements. The little pocket park, both at the curve, and then there's another pocket park at the speed table here with bench seating and some other information there. That one also, we have a pretty good project website, which we need to now update for the end of phase 1 and the beginning of phase 2. But if you're on our website, you can go in and you can see the new traffic control plan for phase 2. We've done handouts and flyers to impacted residents and met with a number of the community members and community groups to let them know what traffic control will look like and how the project will proceed. Phase 2 will be getting underway with a little bit of setup this week, and then more major traffic control movements and things next week. You can see some of the historic pictures and updates from the project here. There's some really neat things, like there's a brief time-lapse video. Let's see if we can get to work. I'm not responsible for the music choices on the time-lapse video, but you can see, I'm going to accelerate this because even on time-lapse, it's a long, complicated project. But you can see that the kind of watch the project occur and see all the major work that went on and kind of get a sense, because again, it's a project that you see the beginning and you see the end, and it sometimes is hard to find all of what occurred during the project. So in this case, you're seeing all the utility work going on with CWS, then you're seeing the contractor come back with gunite and basically install the foundation here with the foundation moving through. If you're not getting sick and dizzy from watching the accelerated video, you'll see now they're removing the old wall and reinstalling the new wall and platform, coming in with the pedestrian platform, building back as they come around the curve again, which is a really complex piece of concrete work there coming around the curve. And this only takes us up as they come back, install railing and kind of the surface components of the wall until where you can see the drainage pipe being lined up for all the new drainage installation that occurred on that project. And we're going to update that now to take us through the rest of the project with that drainage installation, as well as paving and surface restoration work. But it's a great looking project about to start on phase 2. So we're excited that's continuing to go really well.
All right, Councilman Griffin.
Yes, sir. Hey, you know, what I was thinking, Matt, is while you were going through all this stuff, and this is really, really great stuff. I feel like sometimes when we get to our council meetings and we've got so much stuff going on and we get to this part of it, it's so important, but it seems like we're always dog tired by the time we get to it. How would you feel about us maybe doing a workshop to update us on these projects, like in between two meetings, where we could, like, as a council member, submit maybe a project that we know that the city's working on, and we could have like a workshop where we could run through a bunch of different projects so that we could take that and relay it back to our district and kind of not feel like we're so overwhelmed or having to rush through it at council. Because I feel like these slideshows that you're doing are so important, but by the time we get to council and we try to run through them, everybody's, you know, brains hurting, and I just don't feel like we ever really, we haven't done a workshop for these projects in a little while. You know, maybe it'd be worth doing that. I don't know if you guys are interested in that, but I think it would be.
I think that certainly has merit, but why don't we maybe take it a step further on something like this, Mr. Mayor, if you will, can that be, I guess, put up on the agenda, just this, in this case, this one item, and then maybe next month you do the, you know, the wet well presentation that you did with the with Spring Fishburne, but in particular the battery now being completed. You know, right after you open up the meeting and recognize anybody with a resolution or something like that, can we find a spot, you and the clerk, to put a presentation like this, for Mr. Fountain to make a presentation on with PowerPoints, and then we can report the remainder of Public Works later on down on the agenda where it normally is. But it's not going to be every meeting that we're going to have a project like this. There's, you know, we cut the ribbon on, so to speak, and now moving on to phase two. But I think it'd be great for the public to see that. I mean, what we just saw this now. I mean, a little, I don't know, 3-minute presentation on that. What do you think, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I think that's a good idea, particularly with the projects like these two we've just covered that are multi-year projects, and even with the low battery seawall, I don't know if we're really going to have a ribbon cutting or not, because
I just said that. Yeah, I just
on for 5 more years, you know, before we get it all done, and to keep people updated, that makes a lot of sense. I do think that you know, part of what Councilmember Griffin is requesting, though, is what we're doing right here in this committee is you know, take a piece of the city at a time, like we're doing this evening, to talk about the peninsula and go into some detail. These committee meetings are recorded, so they could be replayed. But anyway, I like the idea of highlighting a project every now and again and putting it up front. I think that's a good idea.
I think so. I think pushing it up like that. I mean, Councilman Group, you made mention. I think it's a good idea, in particular before citizens' participation and all of that. I think, in particular, something that we highlight like this, and we always got one that we can highlight. We've got that many of them going on. Well, for this meeting, which is tomorrow, this would be reported out technically on the Public Works Committee report, but this particular slice, I don't know what we have to do to move it up for a special presentation like that, Mr. Mayor, but we have to take a vote of council or something. But if Mr. Fountain is prepared, he can do it, and then again do the remainder of the report.
Yeah, without any objection of council, we can certainly do that.
Great.
And one option, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, is maybe for next council meeting, that would give us a chance to kind of polish it up a little bit if we want to do it as a sort of tight, abbreviated meeting.
I hear you on that. So since it's coming at the next council meeting, we can drop it from Public Works today, save a little time, because you can have a better version at the next meeting, right?
Yeah, let's give Matt a chance to see if he's got some more or better pictures or something else he wants to add to it, and we'll do it next time. That makes sense.
Agree 100%.
Yeah.
So Mr. Fountain, continue.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other ones will be a little bit quicker. Those are kind of two very large projects, one of which is kind of wrapping up. So I wanted to spend a little more time on those. But phase two of the little battery I briefly mentioned, we did issue the notice proceed. Contractors working to modify their traffic control to shift into phase two. It happens to be the same contractor for phase one and phase two, which should make that turnover much easier. Again, we've provided notice to the community and the adjacent residents. We'll be basically getting straight into major work on that project shortly. King and UG phase one. So that project has also been awarded. We are coordinating right now with the contractor on some value engineering approaches based on the potential to modify traffic control requirements on that phase. So we're looking to do that over the next few weeks before we start kind of groundbreaking on the project. But we do expect to have all of the work on that phase completed by this fall. King UG phase two, we're continuing on the design and permitting work for that pump station and outfall. The Forest Acres project, AT&T is continuing their utility relocation work. The city is working through finalizing our last few drainage easement acquisitions on the project, which will be coming to real estate over the next couple months. Then we'll start building the drainage improvement component of the project with a city contractor following the end of AT&T's utility relocations around the end of 2021. The Market Street project, we've been working back and forth with Dominion to try to coordinate some options for undergrounding power on that project. The timeline's a little bit uncertain on that one, and that our streetscaping component of that project obviously is funded out of hospitality accommodations tax work, and that fund is a little more uncertain right now. So we don't have a hard start date on that, but that does give us a lot of time to work through any issues with Dominion on the undergrounding. The Cooper Jackson drainage improvements. This is the east side area. We've completed our field survey work. We've cleaned most of the 10,000 feet of pipe that we were cleaning out as part of our survey and some short-term drainage improvements. We're putting together the existing conditions model right now with AECOM so that we can evaluate basically recommended improvement projects. The Barbary Woods drainage diversion project. We've got our preliminary design work has been going well. We finished all of our basically wetland and initial topographic survey work. We're developing our property acquisition plans, and we should have a 25% complete set of plans. And that's basically we're not that you only have 25% of your plans, but the overall plan set is kind of at a stage that we call about 25% complete of the work sometime in the next month or so. And that'll start to let us get a sense of what the project's going to look like, what the costs are going to be, the property we need to acquire. And so we can keep moving forward with that. The kind of corollary project on Johns Island is the Johns Island Drainage System Evaluation Project. So this is the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant component on Johns Island, where the team is currently taking work, has just kind of finished reviewing work from the city's vulnerability study and the city's comp plan work with the Wagner Ball team for the water side of the comp plan. Taking that data and now incorporating it with their own analysis of Johns Island to start developing their plan for which drainage ways need to be preserved, which need to be rehabilitated. Again, on kind of that natural systems approach. We are starting up a technical advisory group. Invitations for that group went out last week for basically bringing in some technical stakeholders in the area to represent some of the different constituencies. And we'll be discussing the path forward with those residents, which will help, or with those technical staff, which will then help us turn into the next stage of the project, which also includes a residential outreach component to try to gather more input from the island on what we're doing as we move forward. The Windermere Drainage Improvement Evaluation survey work is continuing. We're currently, one of the challenges we had is there's a section of pipe along Folly Road that's in kind of much more heavily sedimented than we expected it to be. So we're actually coordinating right now with DOT, where basically the city is going to use its contractors and clean out that section of pipe while DOT provides traffic control, and our surveyors come back through with the Thomas Nutton team to collect all of the drainage information. So it's kind of, again, hopefully a bunch of different agencies working well together, and that we should provide some short-term drainage improvements by cleaning out some pipes that are clearly having drainage issues, but receiving some reduction in cost on our side from DOT providing very challenging traffic control along Folly Road and helping us shut down lanes and work that they can do, while DOT obviously is receiving the benefit of the city helping them with their infrastructure in the area. So it's another good kind of collaborative style of project. We also have a story map that should be going live in the next week or so to kind of explain on the website, similar to what you just saw with Spring Fishburne and the Low Battery, what's going on the Windermere project and how that works in that neighborhood, and kind of help us have a main focal point for neighborhood outreach and discussion on that project as well as it progresses. The DuPont Wapu improvement projects. So our AECOM field survey teams have been working for the last month or so on the project areas 1 through 4 and are continuing to collect data basically at a design level of survey on, especially on the pipe system, the buried pipe system out there. So they'll be moving to take that data, update their existing model, stormwater model that they've built into preliminary design work that they've done, so we can start putting together some construction plans for the improvements on those 4 projects. And that one, again, is collaborative with Charleston County, where they're funding 25% of that work.
Matt, what kind of time frame you think we have on that before we get to the point of, formulate those construction plans?
So I would say we'd be ready to start construction probably in early 2022 on most of the projects. There might, the section that goes through Epic Center, the Citadel Mall property, right. That's one of the ones that'll be a little more challenging to probably coordinate because there's a lot of different things going on that property all at the same time. Right. But we could always start some of the other projects early if we needed to, but I'd like to try to get it as coordinated as possible because it'll help design the other projects because they all interact out there. Everything's tied together.
You're right, it's a domino effect, no doubt.
But that one is, we're at a point now where we should be hitting the ground and kind of rolling and gathering momentum and working our way through those projects. So I'm excited to see things actually getting built out there because we've done a lot of studying in that area, and it'll be good to see improvements going in. Mm-hmm. It's a very large, complicated system, which is what's been the challenge. Similar in some ways to Church Creek.
Let me ask one last question on that.
Yes.
How we created that new outfall into what is now still referred to as the duck pond, and we got to do better with that. But anyway, so that retention area had extra capacity. We created a ditch to get some water into it. This is over in the Ardmore area. Is there any other capacity issues like that you think can help out in this?
Yeah, we have looked at some areas kind of down on the edge of Councilman Appel's district as you're at the Air Harbor neighborhood. I think you're familiar with that too, Councilman Waring. There's sort of it's right on that drainage divide between the 2 basins, trying to see if there's anything we can do to help move water sort of down the greenway and out in that area to keep water from coming into the DuPont Wapu basin. So that's kind of the other area we've seen that it probably needs a little bit more analysis. And we've got another collaborative project we're trying to lay out actually with the county in that area, because there's a lot of overlapping watersheds where we might see if the county can help us with a little bit of extra survey work and some heavy maintenance work in return for maybe a small project that we'll be looking at this year with Public Works Utilities for one of the larger townhome complexes in the area. So we're always trying to leverage everything we're doing and see if we can do more.
Well, on the other side of this call, I'll give you a call on that same point. Maybe keeping it on the other side of the greenway as opposed to re-entering, the doo-wop drainage district. There was some information on that before you came with the city. So anyway, I'll give you a call after the meeting.
Sure, absolutely. So moving on from DuPont Wapu, the Concord Street pump station upfit. We've been going through our concept design evaluation to upfit the basically that more than 20-year-old pump station. We're about 60% on our concept report, and we'll be hopefully getting a kind of a finalized set of recommendations in the spring to be able to start designing the actual upfit work. The Church Creek flood storage projects, basically the contractors on board. We had our first Church Creek Stormwater Authority meeting with some of the major stakeholders in that area. And we are basically undergoing the preliminary site survey and field visit work at this point, so we can kind of come back with a what's called an action plan for how we start implementing these projects throughout the basin. And that action plan is due to be developed by kind of the April-May timeframe. So we're on a again a really fast-paced project approach out there, because similar to DuPont Wapu, we've done a lot of work studying, we've done a lot of work looking at options. We want to start getting to where we can get into construction on projects in that area as well. the Limehouse Brick Arch Rehabilitation Pilot Project. It's another mouthful. I gotta find a shorter way to phrase my project titles, but this is where we're basically trying to, again, rehabilitate the existing brick arches to tie them better into the stormwater system and improve drainage, especially on the kind of the older portion of the peninsula. We basically are setting up right now with our IDC contractors for lining from the Limehouse Arch up to about Trad Street. We think that's gonna be the first mini phase of the project. We're setting up our schedules right now, working that through, and we'll get that piece knocked out, and then we'll basically start doing the design work on the next section while we're doing the construction work on the back section, kind of work our way, 500 feet at a time or so through the arch system. The Medical District Tunnel Extension, that's the Earhart Shaft. Basically the only thing left on that project at this point is the grant funding that we're waiting on to hear from both HUD, CDBG, and the FEMA brick project, and then the easements, the actual conveyance of the easements to the city by MUSC. We've kind of gone back and forth a few times between the attorneys. The easements are currently being reviewed. The latest update to language is being reviewed by the state, and we hope for that to come back potentially for the March meeting with MUSC to look at basically accepting those easements, hopefully. I think we're pretty close on language, I think, at this point. The Central Park project, we did work with the Parks Department and the county, again, to all three of us kind of collaboratively provide information to the Greenbelt for the parcel at the end of Howell Avenue to look at potentially purchasing that parcel and turning it into some sort of stormwater detention facility to help move some of the flooding off of Howell Avenue and down onto that low-lying parcel. We'll see how that application goes as it moves forward. Again, I think really nice project where the city is basically applying for a Greenbelt project. The county is agreeing to do most of the construction work associated with the project, and then the city would basically maintain and operate it as sort of a passive park space moving forward, which is sort of again, a really nice way to leverage different types of projects all together for funding purposes. The kind of moving into slightly smaller projects, the Mueller Drive drainage easement. We've been working to modify the ditch flow to the northwest instead of the original concept of moving more towards the southeast. We have a pretty good path forward that we're just coordinating with some hand clean crews to kind of go in and do the last parts of that work. And then we've set up with a contractor to clean actually the pipe system that flows to the northwest, basically beyond the edge of that project, because we think there might be some restrictions in that part of the system from looking at it, and that might be part of what's causing some of the flooding in this area. So we're going to go through, as we talked about earlier, with the pipe rehabilitation program, and use this as one of our test case neighborhoods for that as well. The Culpeper Southgate drainage easement, we do have our surveyor hired now for that project, and we'll be basically waiting for that surveyor to complete survey work so we can go in and examine our options for improvement there as well. The Dowden Street, Dowden Court drainage evaluation, we're continuing the field survey work, as well as on West Pawnee Place Bamboo area drainage evaluation. So those are both Thomas Hutton projects that they're doing basically survey work, field investigation, and trying to develop what some options are for improvement. And then we need to circle back around with the residents once we have that information together to discuss what those potential options are. So this one's a little bit different in that Broad and Lockwood, the city has been looking at a kind of a knee wall barrier approach, but we've also been coordinating with the beach company that's been looking at doing improvements to the actual road surface itself to help that intersection drain off. The city design for the knee wall section will probably go as a small project option for allocation in the 2021 funding cycle for public works utilities to consider. The beach company work, Gulfstream is doing their portion of the work under an encroachment permit with DOT. They've started installing pipes to add some extra drainage from the kind of the inside of that corner to the outside into the marsh. I think they've got one pipe in, one pipe halfway in, and they plan, depending on weather over the next 2 weeks, they're expecting to have the pipes complete and some of the road elevation in the next 2 weeks to help shed the water off. So basically their project would help the road drain much faster and not flood quite as frequently, but primarily help it drain much quicker after a flooding event, where then the city project would basically be able to come in behind it and help protect against those high tide events sort of inundating inundating the intersection. So again, a good private-public partnership, hopefully for that that area as well, to improve drainage in that section of the city. And then if did have the other items on the agenda, I think that Councilman Zachary and Councilman Gregory had asked for some updates on a couple areas on the
West Edge area.
heavy rehabilitation work that we've done and the West Edge area. So I'll maybe start with the West Edge one really quickly, because that's a little bit more of a straightforward, if anything, a straightforward in drainage presentation. So this is a map that kind of the West Edge group in Thomas Hutton used to describe the drainage, and it works pretty well to give a sense of what's going on out there. So the left is kind of what the existing situation is. There's basically this very large drainage basin here, this Gadsden Creek President Street Basin, that all sort of tries to drain down through the Gadsden Creek area and into the river here. So the green and the red are showing, green showing stormwater and red showing tidal water. And you can see, when you get high tides, obviously the water comes in and basically floods Gadsden Green and floods some of the streets in this area. When you get heavy rainfall, you get the same basic situation. One of the areas we pump from is down in Allway Street when we see the crosstown flooding to try to move that water out. What is being proposed for West Edge for drainage in this area, let's see if I can move over here, is to basically work with the Spring Fishburne project, the deep tunnel project, again, to separate out the drainage basins. You can see that we're changing the shape of the basins here. The city portion of Spring Fishburne takes this President Street basin here, which is, again, a significant chunk of the existing condition basin, and ties it into the deep tunnel system. So that's part of the reason that the deep tunnel system was built. Is there's a President Street tunnel that runs up cross tunnel that runs up and down President, basically because of a lot of the heavy flooding in this area. If you've been out to Harmon Field and the green here, you notice that there's a very large new shaft and hole that was once a construction site on the edge of the park. That all gets buried and covered, but that's basically the terminus of one of the tunnels. So that water from this upper basin will all go into the deep tunnel system. What we're looking to do with the West Edge coordination is that West Edge is then saying, okay, we are going to take this section that is sort of the green itself and modify the drainage to bring that water, down here basically, and then up and through Stony Field, kind of the backside of Stony Field, into the marsh with a new drainage system. They will tidally control that with check valves so that the tide can't come in. That's where they're showing the red arrow kind of stops here. It doesn't come into the street and up into the flooded area. So that will be their outfall for that. The section of West Edge, the actual kind of core of West Edge, basically gets elevated, and you can see it when you drive out there. So much of it is so elevated that it actually cuts off the tidal inflow through the existing creek area and basically lets that water flow out. So there's no tidal inflow anymore because of the elevation. There's only stormwater outflow. But when you elevate the section of West Edge, what you do is you block drainage from a couple of these very smaller basin areas that used to be able to flow out that way. So West Edge has also worked to install infrastructure to bring that water down into the deep tunnel system as well. And that was some of the early coordination on that project, was to basically take these smaller basins that are cut off and bring them into the Spring Fishburne project. So the concept is basically elevating to avoid tidal flow, bringing certain areas into the deep tunnel pump system because now you have more gravity fall to be able to get to those areas, and then cutting off the tidal inflow that's causing a lot of the heavy flooding that's very challenging to get to, and diverting that out. Again, it doesn't fix some of the outlying flood areas. I mean, there are still challenges with Lockwood as you come around the corner. That's a different section, but it does address much of the flooding on the interior sections of all of these basins. So hopefully that's any questions on that. That's a relatively quick way to describe a few tens of millions of dollars of drainage work, probably.
I saw Councilman Saccharin on the meeting. Councilman Saccharin, you have any questions or observations?
I think he may have signed off. I think he
Okay.
had.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
and then I know Councilman Zachary had asked for, I think Councilman Gregory had originally asked some of the West Edge questions, because I think it's something he certainly had a lot of interest in. Briefly, I guess the section that Councilman Zachary had been interested in, I believe, which I don't know if he was able to make it, if some of his constituents may still be on the line, but was the, see if I can do this, even though it's the same. All right, did that switch over to the peninsular map?
Not yet. It just has that you've started screen sharing.
Okay, this map is,
There you go.
okay, yeah, this map is enormous, enormous file because of all of the topo and pipe network. But this is, Councilman Zachary asked for an update on the rehabilitation work, kind of through his district and where it intersects with Councilman Gregory's district as well. I just wanted to run through some of the kind of the heavy rehab that we've done in the area. The first one is this is going to get a little bit, this can get a little bit challenging to follow because it's such a complex set of pipe network. But this is Rutledge here. You can see in the yellow, we did some heavy drainage rehabilitation work on Rutledge from Poplar down to Gordon through Simmons Street, and cleaned out all of the pipe network here, which was basically completely blocked to get it closer to the outfall, both on Gordon and then down on Grove Street. There's a very large system on Grove Street. We previously cleaned out Grove Street and lined some box culvert and done a series of work a number of years ago along Grove Street. I'm going to try to do these relatively quickly. On President Street, just south of the park. Let's see if I can do this without freezing everyone's computer. On President Street, we cleaned from Moultrie to Congress. So this was another block section that had some major failures on it. We're able to get kind of this whole bowl here that you can see in the topo to start draining, and it comes down Congress and actually drains out through Congress. We also cleaned President from Bogard down to Spring. So this is one of the really challenging areas for drainage in the city. That was when you start getting south towards Septim Clark. So we cleaned this section from Bogard here down through 17, probably not quite low enough. Again, this will be eventually served by the Spring Fishburne project, but we're trying to find some short-term relief because there is some really challenging flooding through this area. So we did go through and rehabilitate those pipes. We also cleaned, we cleaned the repaired pipe at kind of the intersection of Grove and Rutledge. There's some parking lots in here, if you're familiar with this area, that are almost always underwater. We basically got that to now drain well by fixing the sections of Grove that were damaged. And that's been a great improvement in that area from standing water purposes. We also repaired and cleaned Gordon at the Wagner area, which kind of, as you move down this direction, we found some collapses and we're able to clean that and get it out so it flows out into the river. This is what we've done over the last year, kind of in this district from a heavy maintenance perspective. Piedmont and Maple, again, another area that tends to sort of have standing water long after rain events and during rain events. We started out actually cleaning Piedmont and Maple down Maple Street, and then came down Hester, which then comes to Alberta, which then comes to 10th, which then eventually gets into the water. And got all of that cleaned and in really nice condition. Had a lot of improvements kind of along Hester in this area on the 10th Avenue Basin, but we really didn't see much improvement at Piedmont and Maple, which surprised us. And we basically realized that the drainage system here is not as well connected as we thought. And a lot of the Piedmont water is actually coming north all the way up to Peachtree and then coming out Peachtree. So we actually went back and cleaned the Piedmont through Peachtree section here and actually improved the drainage for much of this area as well.
Matt, Piedmont Avenue always had a flooding issue going back into the 60s. Part of that is a low-lying area.
It is, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like parts of it like a valley that dip down in there.
Yes, yeah, you can see. I mean, it's hard to see it on this map because I have it zoomed out so far, but kind of the intersection here is mostly at about 6 feet of elevation, and the surrounding areas are mostly at like 9 and 10 feet of elevation. So this whole section basically drains down into that bowl here. That's why we're trying to address that bowl. It's not perfect, but it now at least will drain out as the tide comes down instead of just sitting for a couple of days. But you're right, many of these neighborhoods are quite challenging. And then let's see, the last one in this area was yes.
Oh, Matt, before you leave that, what's
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
open area right right below Marlowe Drive. Is that a park or something? Or is that a marsh or something?
No, I believe that is a small park.
That's a Hester Street
Oh,
playground.
that's the park. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.
So
Spend many hours out there.
So the other area that we cleaned sort of in this section and rehabilitated was the North Enston San Souci area here. This was another section. It's actually higher in elevation, but was flooding really badly. So we did clean down San Souci to King and got that to drain again better with that high elevation. We were surprised how badly it was flooding. So we were able to get that mostly opened up and drained down towards King Street. Then the only other section kind of in Councilman Zacharias district that we had focused on previously was the almost 2 miles of pipe cleaning we did on the east side recently in Cooper Jackson, going through that whole subdivision and trying to clean out the major blockages and challenges we saw through there. That was my whirlwind tour through some of our Western Peninsula cleaning.
Okay.
It's a lot of work.
All right, Mr. Fountain. I'm telling you, that is a lot. A whole lot. Any questions from committee members? I see Council Lady Jackson's on. You have any questions as we wrap up, Councilwoman?
No, thank you. I'll just be taking notes from my colleagues, Gregory and Saccharin, because I know they really did want to hear all about the details. And Matt, I'm amazed at your memory of recall of maps of places, streets, tunnels. Yeah.
I'm sure he'll run through this again tomorrow, right?
He lives and breathes this stuff. Y'all kidding me?
We will, but anyway, maybe we can summarize some of the ones we're more familiar with. Mr. Mayor?
I just wanted to ask Matt, and maybe they don't really look through what they clean out, but is it mostly silt? Is it a lot of organic debris like leaves and limbs? Is it?
So it depends what area you're in, Mayor. Different pipe materials and different habitats lead to different issues. So like in this section, the Wagner Terrace section, we see a lot of tree root intrusion because you have a lot of vitrified clay pipe. You have a lot of really beautiful live oak trees, and the oak roots will basically go in and block the pipe. And once the oak roots are in there, it acts to like make like a grid almost in the pipe, and then all the leaves and anything else that get in there get caught by the roots, and it just makes a complete solid plug very, very quickly. Right. Those are hard, especially in the vitrified clay. That's why this area is so challenging to maintain. That if you normally use a root cutter to remove roots, which a root cutter is basically looks like something from Mad Max. You like have like a spinning set of chains on the end of a probe, basically on the vac truck, and it tries to basically spin and cut its way through the roots and rip the roots out. On a vitrified clay pipe, the risk is you destroy the entire pipe while you're doing it. So it's a much more challenging thing to clean, and it tends to be both time consuming and expensive. But that's the challenge in Wagner Terrace. In a lot of West Ashley, it's leaves a lot of the time. A lot of the inner West Ashley, you get these beautiful oak trees just constantly all year round dropping leaves. They'll flush into the drainage. If you go into older neighborhoods that don't have tree leaves, then it'll be sediment, but there aren't normally as many blockages because the sediment takes longer to accumulate. But if there is a blockage of sediment, it's much worse. Mm-hmm. And then if you get into the peninsula, it frequently collapses. It'll be either utility penetration at some point that had the pipe fail, and you'll see the actual pipe completely collapsed. And often the penetrations might be 100 years old downtown because the pipes are that old. It's not necessarily something new that's happened. It's just trying to find all of those and repair them. But we do look, and you do see regional consistency, but it's not universal across the whole city.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Councilman Appel.
Matt, thanks again for another wonderful presentation, and I'm very excited to see not just what's happening on the peninsula, but all the exciting projects we've got in West Ashley and James Island. I had a question about the marsh outfall general permits. Just real generally, where do we stand on that? What are some milestones on the horizon, and what can we do to help you in that effort.
Yeah, so the DHEC has been working through, I think you've seen some of the drafts that they've put together. They've sort of been waiting for a little more information from the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps goes through a nationwide permit update on like a 5-year cycle. I think it's 5 years. This year was their year for doing many of their nationwide permits, so they really haven't been touching the outfall permits while they've been getting through the like mandated nationwide permits they had to do. They expected to get back into the outfall permits in February, so I expect we'll see something from them over the next couple of months. I think what we need to do is continue to, on that one, advocate with DHEC to consider, what qualifies as maintenance again. The Army Corps has a pretty reasonable definition generally for maintenance. DHEC's a little bit more restrictive generally on what they've included in their maintenance definition, and I think that's something we need to spend time and attention on. We have on the upside seen a decrease in time on review of maintenance review requests we've asked for from DHEC. They do seem to be prioritizing that more. We actually did just get approval for maintenance cleanouts on the Burns Down outfall actually in your district, which is one of the ones we've been working through. So we now need to come up with a hydro excavation plan for it and see if we need to do it contractor wise or with ourselves, with our own forces. But we at least do have the permit saying, yes, you can do this as maintenance. Yes, it is clearly an existing major important channel. So that was really important.
Got it. I mean, would it be as simple as to harmonize the Army Corps' definition of maintenance with DHEC OCRMs? I mean, would that be just an elegant way of trying to tee this up? Because one of the thoughts I had is that, this could be a legislative solution. We get our delegation to work on this term, because it sounds like the bureaucrats at DHEC OCRM are maybe a little. I can tell there's some tension there, and this may just be a way we can nip this whole issue in the bud, and perhaps mirroring the federal government's definition with the state's definition may be one way of going about doing that. I mean, does that have any?
It's a good question.
Logic to it?
It does. The federal definition has been somewhat varied or mobile over the last 2 administrations. So that's the only challenge, is that the current guidance. I don't know what the longevity of the current guidance is. The way the Waters of the United States rules work. South Carolina is under the old Waters of the United States rule. There was a new Waters of the United States rule put in by the Obama administration that was stayed in South Carolina due to a series of lawsuits, as well as like 22 other states. Then the Trump administration actually instituted another Waters of the United States review while the Obama administration one was still stayed, which I think retracted it, but I'm not entirely sure. That one I think is also still stayed, so we're still under the previous one, which is I think from the 80s. I have to pull my notes. So it gets interesting quickly. So yes, but also no, I think is the answer there.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, we'll keep up the good work on that. And I just am, this is such a big, positive improvement on the horizon, just the ability to clean out these outfalls. I can already tell anecdotally in my district, this has really made a difference, knock on wood. And it's not always about, you've got the Spring Fishburne project, and that's awesome and huge, but in some of these outer boroughs, as Councilwoman Jackson likes to put it, sometimes, getting a shovel into a pipe, into a marsh can really have significant impacts. And the more red tape we can eliminate on that front, I think the better off we'll be. So thanks again for all your great work on pushing that along, and just let us know what we can do to help.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. And you're right. I mean, the outfalls are incredibly important. I mean, so are as Councilman Shady brought up earlier, so are the neighborhood rehabilitation programs. And that's why we're working through, even with the angst and the grief it sometimes causes, the amount of flood relief you get is very significant. So it's worth pushing through the difficulty to make it, kind of get through the initial pain, have their ditches restored, their outfalls kind of the marsh will come back and be healthy, right? And yet the neighborhoods will now drain during low tides, which is a huge improvement from a drainage perspective.
Okay, any last comments? thanks again, Matt. Make us all proud, seriously. I think
Thanks, Matt.
that's it. Any last items? If there aren't any, by acclamation, we stand adjourned. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.